Welcome to the Linux Saloon, a place to discuss tech, open source, and where Linux is always on tap. Each show we'll have a talk about a Linux project, such as a distribution, desktop environment, application. We also chat about news and any variety of topics from the community. Anything that is Linux, tech, and open source related is on the table for discussion. I'm Nate, a Linux fitness and vintage tech enthusiast with an almost unhealthy obsession with the Open SUSE project. And with me today, I have a fantastic panel of people. I've got the Vashnator, Eris, Servan, Jinda, Terry, Colin, and of course, sleepy-eyed Vince, who doesn't look so sleepy-eyed today. How is everybody?
Excellent.
Good.
Well, coming up today is an open mic night. But before we kick that part off, I always like to know what people are doing in Linux. And as such, I understand that you, Vince, and Jinda have been playing around with something that was suggested by Prophetic. What is this something?
Yeah, so last night I was just checking my Telegram and Prophetic had posted this video from Nova Spirit Tech. I think his name is Don. He does a lot of stuff with Raspberry Pis and Dockers and things. And I've myself been diving a little bit into self-hosting stuff at home and Dockers and things like that. Now, I don't know if any of you have self-host stuff. There are various ways you can do it. You can get yourself a little Raspberry Pi to put on like a Pi-hole or a VPN or something like that, so that you can have these services available to like all the computers on your network. Dockers are a way to sort of simplify those because you can actually make all these little services into containers, and they can sort of be brought up, spun up, tested to see if they work or how well they work for you, and then thrown away. Many of you will know about the Nextcloud Snap and how easy that is to sort of set up and use. Dockers sort of take that to the next level because you can apply that to a whole lot of other things. And the thing that Prophetic shared was this way of having in your browser a desktop Linux system. So the way that this app called Kasm, it's spelled Kasm, does it is it has a lot of different distros. It's got I saw Ubuntu on there. I saw CentOS. I saw some other ones too, but it also has some other just dedicated apps, so you can actually run a Firefox within your browser. So it's like a Firefox that runs on your server, but shown in your browser, which is heckin' cool. So I spun this up. I had a look at the Docker Hub image for Kasm, as well as there's another person called Linux Server who does a whole lot of these things too, and he sort of has finagled them into a way that it's a bit easier to get working in your system. So I used linuxserver.io's image of Kasm. It took me all of like 15 minutes to look at the Docker Compose file, put it on my system, and bring it up. And it's a really cool thing. So, for example, if I'm at work where we use Windows and I'm just in a browser, and I wanted something like I wanted a Linux something. I wanted to do something in Linux. I'll log into my network at home and log into this app Kasm that I have, and I've got like an Ubuntu desktop in my browser. That's just really cool.
That is very cool. Now, how much time would you say it took to actually get that going? I'm sure there's probably some like challenges in learning how to set it up initially and so forth. But
right. So
how much time would you say you had invested in that?
I've been playing with Dockers for a few months now.
Okay.
And I have to thank Adam Grubbs for his assistance, because at first I had no idea what I was doing. There is a little bit of learning to do with Docker, but in my opinion, I think it's a good way to learn this stuff at home. Now, I know Docker has its professional uses. It's used a lot in a lot of development environments and organizations and things. And I also understand that Dockers aren't the overall solution for everything, but because these things are all containerized, you can bring them up, and if something goes wrong, throw it away essentially, like delete it. And there's nothing that's left on your system. There's no trace of it if you've done it right, which means that you can bring these things up, throw them away as often as you like without any trouble.
That's very cool. And now getting that service to work so you can access it through a browser, the Firefox or Ubuntu within Firefox, whatever.
Yeah.
Could you do that with like a Windows application?
I imagine you could. I just haven't seen it myself yet. But you know how open source is. Like if you have an idea, either someone's made it or it's possible to do.
Right. Just get the right bits and pieces together, and all of a sudden it can be a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. So do you see yourself using this for like lots of different testing, or how do you foresee like long term using this?
Well, okay. Here's the other thing as well. I did a count last night, and I have 16 containers on my server. I probably touch maybe one or two of those each day. The rest of them are just up there as a plaything, as a toy.
I got you.
So I'm playing essentially.
Okay. Well, that's very cool. So, is that Kasm Workspaces? Is that how it's pronounced? Container
KASM.
stream. Yeah, container stream platform. That's very cool. I'll make sure that is in the show notes. That seems like something that we should play with. I just don't know exactly what I would do, but I know that I want to do it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, a lot of these things, I have a solution before I have a problem.
Yeah. It's a really, I mean, it looks like a really fun thing to play around with, for sure. I mean, I wonder what the limitations are with this. 'Cause I imagine you could have like a workspace, that you're doing something. Maybe it's a tedious something, and then you can disconnect from it and then come back to it, at different times, whatever's needed. And to me, that sounds very compelling, and I'm very, very fascinated by this at all, for sure.
Yeah.
So Jinda, you were playing with this as well?
Yeah, I had the same pretty much experience that Vince had. I was interested in because I like Proxmox.
Okay.
And I thought this would be fun to try out. And I've been playing with it, for a couple hours. And I don't know, I thought it was kind of neat. I actually got it to work, which I was shocked, but
I'm not shocked.
it is definitely really kind of cool. I mean, let me put it this way. I have no use for it whatsoever, but it's really cool.
Just because you don't have a use for it, it doesn't mean you can't, appreciate it, right?
Oh, I love it. I think it's the neatest thing in the world. I really do. I mean, it is so cool. I mean, this is where, I don't know, to me, I don't know if you guys have noticed more applications that are web-based applications are coming out and more commonplace. And I think that's going to take over real quick because too many people are using too many different devices like cell phones, Chromebooks, Linux, Mac, Windows, and blah, blah, blah. And you can run that in a browser, and then you don't have to pay Microsoft or whoever. I don't know. I think this kind of stuff is going to become way more commonplace in the years to come.
Yeah, could be.
I mean, I could be dead wrong.
Or you could be dead right. I think the thing that I think is really compelling, though, is just to be able to have access to a thing no matter where you are that's running on your own server, your own equipment, or whatever. To me, there's a very compelling story to be told right there.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, and thanks to Prophetic for sharing that in the forum for the in the chat and in the Telegram, so we could all have some fun with that.
I would highly recommend someone like Nova Spirit Tech for his videos. If anyone wants to kind of dive into this, I think his name's Don. He explains it pretty well, and he's also set up some really cool, easy ways to get it going if you have a Raspberry Pi.
Okay, that's cool, and I do have a Raspberry Pi. That makes it all that much better.
Yeah, he's got some of the best Raspberry Pi stuff.
Do you have a link to his channel that you can share with the class?
I just posted the link to the video for the Kasm, is it called? So
Jinda's a mind reader.
Sorry, didn't mean it.
No, it's totally good. In fact, you should mean it. That is definitely something that I'd like to check out in the not too distant future. Eris, you did a StrawPole. And I found this to be another one of those really fun straw polls, but I wanted to write a bunch of comments just because I don't have a clean answer. So do tell.
So my question was, how many monitors you use in your main system. And I took it into account. Some people have an ultra wide and some people have non-ultra wides. So I just put 1 through, I think, 6 or something, non-ultra wide, and then 1 through 3 ultra wide. And these were the results. 43% said 1 non-ultra wide. 33% said 2 non-ultra wides, and then 14% said 1 ultra wide. Other was 10%, and that's about it. I did get some replies. Somebody said, I voted other. At work, I use a 24-inch second monitor. At home, I use a 50-inch 4K TV as a second monitor. And then somebody says, I have an ultra wide and 2 regular monitors. Where does that put me? And I said other. And then somebody said ultra wide and a standard monitor on the side. The monitor often comes in hand and very handy. I can give some interesting examples. In my case, it helps with screen sharing in Linux. I can share a specific display in Teams, but I can't limit to a particular window. So sharing my ultra wide makes it impossible to see for someone who doesn't also have an ultra wide on the other end. By having a normal monitor, I can share it, and the people in the meeting don't have an issue reading the content.
Yep, that's very cool. That's a good way to use it for sure too. You said on your main system, and I kind of consider this to be my main system, so I just have 1 ultra wide on this, but I have my workstation in my house, which is my laptop with it has a 1080p screen. I have a monitor above it with a 1080p screen, and then I got this little. It's for another project, but in the meantime, I may as well use it. There's a little like a yo-yo or something like that. It's like a little monitor. It's a little 8-inch monitor that I have standard aspect ratio just on its side, and I just put Telegram in there and as a chat, and I just keep that up and persistent on all virtual desktops. So whatever desktop I go to, that's still always there, and it's pretty handy actually. It's actually a pretty nice setup. It's not as nice as an ultra wide, which I think is kind of funny because like 1 ultra wide is seemingly more practical in many cases than multiple screens. I don't know if anybody else has that feeling at all. That's kind of where I'm settling right now.
Yeah, I tend to mostly use an ultra wide. I do have a second screen that's the normal aspect ratio, specifically do screen share because it is annoying for other people if you do have that ultra wide
Right.
and try to share that.
Oh, for sure.
I remember Martin Wimpers in his live streams. I think he said he had an ultra wide, but somehow he was able to share like a 1080p screen out of it. I don't know how he did that. And I think he said that it was kind of difficult for him to explain that, but if people wanted him to explain, he would. So I found that interesting because I don't know how you would share like a 1080p screen out of an ultra wide.
Yeah,
I've heard him talk about that as well. And I think he uses like a virtual monitor. He's created like a virtual monitor on his
okay.
desktop.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. I don't understand how it works either.
Yeah, I've created a virtual monitor and I've used it to like vert screen or something like that. And I use a tablet with using like VNC. You can have that work somehow. So you could probably modify that just to be a portion of your ultra wide. That's pretty cool.
I did that with my Raspberry Pi for my television. It breaks it up into 4 different monitors.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal really to do. I just looked online how to do it and figured out the script and ran it.
Not that big of a deal to do, and yet I have no idea how that is. Huh?
I don't really either. I just followed the instructions. There's a big difference in understanding what you're doing, right?
So got in the chat, this Dwayne Avery, he said he has 3 27-inch 1080p monitors and a 4K 43-inch monitor TV. Now, all hooked up to one. I wonder if that's the case, because if so, that's pretty crazy huge. And Ron Singh says, "Wow, I'm a pathetic compared to you, screen fiends. I'm a mere 12.5-inch 1366 by 768 IPS panel on my X220. I wonder if he's like holding back other things he's just not telling." And thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. You are a swell feller. So, Mark, welcome to the stream. Nice to have you with your fancy blurred background.
Yeah, nice to be here.
How many screens do you have hooked up on your primary machine?
Just two 24-inch monitors.
Seems pretty sizable to me.
Work provided them.
Oh, well, good for work. It's nice when they provide nice things.
Previous employer, I should say.
I won't ask any questions.
Do ultra wides have an ability for you to split them up into two monitors? Like if they're like the equivalent of two monitors, can you like use two inputs to split side to side, or is that just like?
I think some do. I have one over there that has two inputs. You can actually set up so it's two separate monitors. It'd be standard aspect ratio. This one I'm using does not. So
Yeah, some do. Some have like software that can go with them that'll let you more easily lay out your windows in like 3 different columns or something. It really just depends. But yeah, it's one of those things you kind of have to look at all the setups. Like the one I have actually can do like DisplayPort daisy chaining, but I don't have anything else to connect it to. So that's kind of interesting.
is that it's the monitor you're using right now as I stumble over my words?
It's kind of my main one. I'm not
Okay.
using it on this machine right this
Okay.
second.
Okay. Now, Fradham says he's running 3 1080p 22-inch displays, all running at 165 megahertz. That's crazy go nuts. I didn't think 165 megahertz was an actual thing. That's crazy. Wow. Well, all right. So it's time to get on to the main topic. It's an open mic night, so we take topics from the Discord, Discourse Forum, Telegram, Discord, and Matrix groups, and dive into the conversations in real time. Now, Vash, you did a video. We talked about you doing this video. It was about how you have completely switched using Linux and I think and a little Mac. You've completely gone away from Windows and how it's benefited your life. Now, the video isn't in and of itself the topic, but it's some of the substance of that video that I kind of want to dig into. So you said something about how Linux has essentially reignited your love for tech, or ignited a love for tech, I guess. And I wanted to kind of discuss a certain aspects about that, as far as like, what is it that you would say it ignited as far as a love for tech? Is it something to do with because it was forced you to learn, or what was the actual part that created this new desire?
More of a reignition, but I really think the biggest thing is just I felt like I said in kind of the video, that Windows was ultimately kind of fighting me. There were various things that would happen in Windows that either you couldn't explain, or if you got an error, it was a very generic error. That was what somebody actually commented on the video. It's very refreshing to actually get error output you can look at and try to figure out what the problem is. And yes, that is very true. At times in Linux, you can do that. But I had just not really realized how demotivated I was to really mess with Windows. And I think that was really it. When I started switching it up, that's where ultimately it started to really kind of click back in as to why I really ended up getting more into computers and stuff like that in the first place.
Now, what kind of rang in me on that is, actually the reason that this came up was because there was someone did a reaction video, this Dark One, Linux Tech Gaming, did a reaction video to your video. So I wanted to hear his reaction to your video, which I watched some weeks back, and that got me to thinking. In a very similar way, I started to really enjoy tech again because of Linux as well. That limiting factor I felt like I guess it'd be the late 90s now, of not really enjoying my technology very much. It's just more of a thing, just something I used. And I was curious to see if that carried over to anybody else who runs Linux on the regular. Colin, you do a lot of videos, and have you ever done any videos on something in Windows?
I've used Windows to demonstrate dual booting and things like that. So that's what I've mainly used Windows for. And I have done, I think, installing Windows as well, how to get around putting your email in, and just as opposed to just setting it as a standard user. Mm-hmm. So, and that probably needs to be done again, because Windows 11's made it very difficult to do that. You've got to drop to a command prompt now to get around those things to install Windows without an email. So so I have done things like that. Not a lot of Windows videos, because I think there's a few people a lot bigger than me in the YouTube world that do Windows videos. So it's not my place to do those things, but it's just relative to Linux, a lot of them. So
would you say that you have a similar kind of a feeling that Linux sort of brings an excitement about your technology more so than what you got out of using Windows? I'm not saying this to bash Windows, by the way. I'm just saying this. It's an interesting conversation.
No. Windows was just for me. I think I've told the story before. It got to the point where I couldn't install my Windows disk that I bought. It was a home edition, and because I didn't reinstalled it so many times, they didn't allow me to install it again. And that was frustrating because it's my disk. I wanted to use it as many times as I like. So I used to mess around with reinstalling Windows so many times. It was an XP one. It was a home edition. And that was just terribly frustrating, because if I buy something, it should be mine to do what I want to do with. And I got to the point of frustration. That's where I looked for alternative. I went out to look for alternative operating systems, because I didn't think there was anything else out there until somebody told me about Linux. I did a search on the old dial-up internet many years ago and found a guy that I paid him, I think, I don't know, $10 or something. He sent me a few discs and started messing around with them. It went from there.
Yeah, that's cool. Servan, you're probably the newest to come to Linux in this group here, I'm going to say. Would you say that you felt some of the have a similar experience as Vash did as far as it igniting your love for technology, Linux?
It's not specifically a love for technology, but it ignited, not reignited, my interest in computers. So I use computers for a lot of things, but I tinker with them a little bit, but not too much on the operating system side before. Because again, Windows doesn't allow you to do that. You have to go to registry and follow some random tutorials to hack some registry numbers, which no one knows what those are. I try to understand those, but it's like everything is different. It's so obscure.
Right.
But yeah, so that's one thing you have to be careful for when like tweaking stuff in Windows. But in Linux, again, you have to be careful tweaking stuff. If you mess the wrong user lib file, that app is gone, or in some cases your OS is gone. So whenever you're tinkering, you have to be careful. But for me, who tinkers a lot, you have to be careful anyways. But at least in Linux, you can tinker. Even if it destroys your OS, you can tinker. But you can't do that in Windows for sure, because 100% you can't like fix it. But at least in Linux, I've gotten to the point where if I can break my system, I can fix it.
Right.
For the most part, I can fix my system if I can break it. So that's really good. I don't think if my Windows system breaks, I can fix it. Everything is so obscure.
Right. Okay. Terry, how long have you been using Linux?
I've been using Linux since 2016.
Okay. So quite some time.
Yeah.
Would you say you have a similar experience to Vash, that running Linux kind of ignited some excitement for technology?
Oh, definitely. With the choices and everything, with distros, big difference. I was looking for something, to get rid of Windows with all the issues that you have with Windows. I was ready to bail out.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have anything to comment on that? Like, there's something maybe specific that Linux kind of gave you there?
And one thing I haven't mentioned is the learning aspect.
Mm-hmm.
When you use mostly like Mac or Windows, you don't know how your operating system is actually operating your computer, like what's happening underneath. But if you want to, because Linux file systems are standard in most part, you actually know what's happening underneath. Like, even though you can't like interfere with much of what's happening, you learn different stuff. Okay, what's a bootloader? What's a file system? What's partitioning? okay, where do your apps go if you install via system, or things like that, where are the config files, like all these things which are like obscured in Windows and Mac. In Linux, you know where things are, you can learn about them, you can again play with them. So that's you learn about computers in general. Like you learn about, if you want to, again, you don't need to. If you want to, you can learn about how operating systems work, how installers work, how bootloaders work,
Mhm.
and a whole bunch of things.
That is fun. Now, Vash, you said that because of learning Linux since 2018, you enhanced a lot of skills. You learned new things. You actually got a new job as a consequence.
Yeah, so I'd say the job I actually left is more of a consequence, just because that job I mostly got because of my knowledge that I gained about Python, and I probably would not have gotten back into Python or really into Python really without being in Linux, because I just wouldn't have been on the computer as much. I would have been treating it more like a box that you check email on or something, So that is that one in particular really was the one that pushed me, or the Linux in particular was really what pushed me to get to the point I did in Python. And that is what ended up getting me the job, the previous job, because I had showed them, hey, I've already put together this dashboard that in Python, and that's something they were looking for. So it ended up also kind of making it work out where I could take the new job that I just got, but it wasn't directly because of Linux on that one.
Yeah, but you said it helped, or it helped lead you into that, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely pushed me into getting into Python, and that ended up getting me that job. And then, I learned a lot about what I liked, what I didn't like about the current employer, and just kind of ended up, figuring out, okay, I think it's time to try something new and try something a little bit different. So, but yeah, I think the aspects of Linux that have really helped me also is just talked about earlier, was you can know a lot more about the operating system, and that helps me think more about how something is laid out in a program. I wouldn't call myself a programmer at all. I'm a scripter at best, but a lot of the aspects of programming that you can kind of think through logically sometimes can really help you when you're trying to solve a problem or look for an issue, which, as a business analyst, that's what you do.
Right. Makes sense.
Well, I was going to say, one of the things that Linux does is when I was making videos trying to find problems and troubleshoot problems, I found that Linux was so easy to reinstall that breaking it was the best thing. So if you had a problem, you could just manipulate files and see whether it fixes the problem or it doesn't fix the problem, either breaks it or it doesn't. Then you can reinstall and then do it again. And you can even do it in a virtual box and just take a what do you call it? You take a copy of that and then you can just put it back to where it was in VirtualBox and just keep breaking the system, go back to the start. It's just fantastic that you can do those things. Once you figure out the problem, then you can make a video on it. It's even better on real hardware. And then you can make a video on it and then show people this is how you fix it. That's what I used to do quite a lot. But I never thought I'd see myself doing bash scripts. I hack on other people's bash scripts, but the imagination you can come up with that makes your life so much easier. Once you fresh install Linux distro, you can use those bash scripts to just put everything in place without, because I used to manually type this, type that as separate commands, do it all in one hit. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just got that imagination that I've never had before.
That's super cool. It's really empowering to hear. Now, I can't get to all the chats in the chat because I can't, but I thought this was very interesting from Dwayne Avery. Says he was an admin for CPM. I know what that is. NPM, no idea what that is. Unix, Linux. Not that long a while ago. I'm running Linux at home since it existed under VMware for 7+ years now, running Debian 11 on Proxmox and on bare metal. Wow, someone who used CPM. I've never touched a CPM system. Don't know what an NPM is, but that's very cool. I watched something on it was the computer they used in war games. I just looked it up and I can't remember what it was.
Whopper.
Not the Whopper, not the war computer, but the one that the kid used.
Oh.
Anyway, it's like an Altair, but it's not. No, it's almost like a clone of an Altair. Oh, NPM is a multi-user CPM. Oh, very cool. Thanks, Ron. Yeah, that was running CPM. And I was watching somebody like this guy who he works. He's a retired engineer from Microsoft, and he built or he got one of these machines, and he was talking about that. Actually, I watched a video on how the registration system worked and why you got locked out, Colin. So I thought that was also very interesting too. Anyway, so that's good stuff right there. As I get myself into a paper bag that I can't get out of. All right, well, very cool, Dash. I really enjoyed the some of those subjects in all those subjects in your video. I thought it was really thought provoking, and I like to hear how other people kind of conduct their Linux journeys and so forth. And so it's just interesting to hear for sure. Eris, how long have you been running Linux? You said like 2012, I think, or something like that. 2009, 8, something like that.
2000 and I mean, I dual booted probably 2007, 2006, something like that.
Okay.
And full time probably 2012
That's
or 11, something like that. I think I see it says that David Lightman used to connect his computer to the outside world was an IMSA I-212A. I think it's the computer for the war games.
Oh, yeah, something like that. Yeah, Dwayne Aver says the Altair was a bomb in those days. You had to be rich to own one. Yeah, it's true. And Eris, do you do anything professionally in Linux, or is it all hobby?
No, it's both.
It's both. Yep, Ron got it. The MSI 8080. That's what it was. That's a neat system. I would like to have one of those clones someday. You have to get them from Australia, though. That's where they come from, those clones for the MSI 8080. I want to welcome Scrapjaw. I see you got a guest with you. Is he trying to run off?
Yeah, this is my neighbor, Carson. He's hanging out. We just had
Carson
and his mama and all that. This is all family stuff. I was like, oh wait, the guy's wrong. I'm gonna say, hey, he's into computer stuff a little bit too. I was just showing him, gotta start him young on this Linux journey, right?
Yep.
No
Say,
harm
hey,
in
Carson.
that.
So
Sure.
Carson was telling me that he does a little bit of programming and things with Roblox and whatnot. I don't know how that works, but how does that work?
I code.
It's
I
code.
program animations and currency for Roblox.
Oh, that's cool.
Nice.
In the 6th grade.
Wow. I think I was excited that I spelled inappropriate things on my segmented display calculator when I was in the 6th grade.
Model. I also model.
Like 3D modeling?
3D modeling.
That's awesome. Do you use
Cool.
Blender?
Yeah.
Yep, that's excellent. So there are, if you can get good at 3D modeling with Blender, there are lots of jobs out there for 3D modelers in Blender. So something to keep in mind.
I love Blender.
That's cool.
I use it for programming and 3D modeling.
That's amazing. Very cool. Well, if you ever have something you want to share with the class, feel free. We'd like to share each other's fun things they do.
Yeah, what's your Discord? I'll join.
Have to ask Eris on how to get to it. I'm kind of an old fuddy
I'll get in there. I
Okay.
don't see many people on the Discord associated with us, but it's there.
It's there. I think it's not pushing it enough, but yeah, it's there. Well, if more people put stuff in there, more people will see it and respond. That's how it boils down to.
True.
Yeah, very cool. Well, hey, thanks for hanging out. The more the merrier. That's what I have to say.
If I get a chance to hook up some guitar for us on the way out tonight, I will. I don't have much of a voice, but I'm here. I'll just be an ugly face to grimace at.
What
Grimacing
am I
is great.
supposed to do? How am I going to be? I thought I had the ugly face card on.
You just have competition now. That's the only
Yeah, I
thing.
just got
You
competition.
don't play enough bass.
No, I never played a bass.
There was a news story that is kind of a controversial news story I want to bring up. So last week on Destination Linux, there was a discussion about advertising in a distro. Is it okay? Specifically, Ubuntu advertising Ubuntu Pro in the terminal when doing an upgrade with apt. I'm a little mixed on this because I can see where it could be a problem, but I don't see it as a problem right now. But maybe someone else has some other ideas on this. Do you think it's appropriate that Ubuntu is putting some advertising in the terminal when you do some apt actions, I think it's apt upgrades for Ubuntu Pro? Do you think that's appropriate?
I think it's for me personally, as long as if it's not more than 2 lines, I think it's fine. And if it's not every single time, I gotta see that. I mean, you can always go in the settings and just tick it off. But I think no more than 2 lines, preferably just 1 line.
Well, it's after an update, isn't it? Doesn't it pop up after an update?
I think it's as you're doing an update. I haven't experienced that. I don't have an Ubuntu system to test that on right now.
I think it's when you do app commands.
Yeah, something like that. People are angry.
I'm a bit hesitant to call it advertising in a way. I mean, first of all, it's Ubuntu's distro. They can do whatever they like with it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to use it. That's the great thing about open source.
Mhm.
But I saw it more as an informative little post. So it was a new thing that they've got, this Ubuntu Pro. I think it's taken over from the old Ubuntu Advantage. And it allows personal users free access to extended support for up to 5 of their machines, up from 5 years of LTS support to 10 years of LTS support. And if you weren't completely up to date with all the information, then you would be informed of this at that time, right?
Mhm.
Yes, granted, Ubuntu Pro can be a paid service for companies and organizations if they want it. But I saw it more as an informative post for me, and it's something that I don't mind having. It just takes up a couple of lines. I have, for my Docker server, I do run Ubuntu Server LCS 2204. I chose it because I knew it was going to be solid, and I knew that it was going to be well supported. And this is one of those things. So I think for us desktop users, the majority of us probably maybe switching out their desktop machines a lot in terms of the OS.
Mhm.
But there are also going to be use cases, particularly with servers, where you may leave them for 5 years or more. You don't want
Right.
to necessarily change it. You just want it running and you just want it working. And so I think having that choice there is a good thing, particularly with like Ubuntu. And I think CentOS is a bit like that in terms of its support cycle as well. It's very, very long.
Mhm.
And that's something that I kind of, I mean, I'm looking at my desktop now. It's Arco Linux, so that's Arch, essentially. So I have lived that sort of rolling life, and I am living that rolling life. But I've come back a little bit and thought to myself, there are some systems that I want that need to be just working, stable, don't move very much. And so I've come back around to using something like Ubuntu, where I know an LCS is going to be supported with security updates and whatnot for 5 years, and now more if you want the Ubuntu Pro.
I honestly think it was more for system admins
Mhm.
that are probably doing system admin in businesses and that, to let them know that they can have that extra support. Because obviously nobody wants to change a whole business of computers to another upgrade if they don't have to. So maybe that was their way of getting the message out to those business system admins.
Yeah,
I think that was mainly what it was for.
Companies move slowly.
Mhm.
And to give you an example with our work, granted we don't run Linux, they're Windows boxes, but we had a Windows box that had been running for over 10 years. And it wasn't until Microsoft came out and said, this version of Windows is going to be no longer supported. You're not going to get any more security updates, that we had to move it along. Get
Was
new
it a Windows
hardware to
XP
run.
box?
No, it was a Windows Server 2003, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
And even then, for a period of time, for about a year or so, we were still running it unsupported. So big security risk because we just couldn't get our act together to actually get it all sorted and upgraded. Don't do that, folks.
So since we mentioned the Ubuntu Pro, like Vince said, you can get like a home user license, and you can have 5 machines for 10 years, because usually the the LTS is 5-year support. You get 10-year support in case anybody's interested.
I
One
personally,
thing I was trying to think about is there any other distro that is run as a business like Ubuntu is that actually has their main distro be like the one that they just put out? I mean, Red Hat, you have to unless you're a developer, you have to pay a license fee to have Red Hat really get any updates. And then OpenSUSE or SUSE, they have their own stuff, but they have OpenSUSE over there. That's, again, a different thing. I don't know of anything else that really has their kind of mainline distro as their also business distro as well.
well, the OpenSUSE Leap and SLE are binary compatible. They're the same build. In fact, most of the
Okay.
packages are the same. So their model has been, if you set somebody up with OpenSUSE business with Leap or whatever, they have, grown or whatever, and they have more requirements than let's say their IT initially set up. They can get then support. They can pay for support for that from SUSE, and so it's a very easy transition. It's not a destructive change over or whatever. It's the same basic binary. You just one has support, one doesn't. That's the only real difference. So they do that now, I guess. So but they have a pretty clear model, and they make no bones about the fact that you can do that, but they don't force it at all. But I don't see what Ubuntu or Canonical is doing by putting the message in an apt as pushy. I think just letting people know, hey, you can get support, and here's how you can do it. And to me, that seems reasonable.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of overreactions, just in my opinion. There is a fine line there, and I think it's more people reacting to the fact it's canonical than people reacting to the fact that, it was 2 lines in the terminal or whatever it was.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know, I think that the idea that people get so upset about an open source company trying to monetize is a little bit, I don't know, disconcerting for me. I mean, people have to eat. So, I mean, how else are you going to fund the project? Electricity isn't free. The servers aren't free. The hardware isn't free. But yet, it's expected to give the software out for free. I mean, I understand it's open, but there's got to be something there, some way they can monetize, for those that can afford it, can help out or whatever. Steve, welcome.
Howdy.
You look like you've
All right.
lost 5 years. How you doing?
Okay. Not feeling 100% today, so that's why I'm a little out of it.
No, I was saying you lost 5 years. Like you look 5 years younger.
I think it's the shirt.
Could be the shirt.
Right.
Yeah, it's a shirt.
Need some glasses.
New glasses? Is that what did it?
No, you need some glasses.
Oh no, I got LASIK. I'm good.
Oh, okay.
I probably need reading glasses though now, but don't tell anybody. Do you have any reading glasses? Anyway, Steve, have you read about this controversy concerning Canonical and putting a little Ubuntu Pro advertising in the terminal?
Honestly, I have not. I must be on another island here somewhere, but no, I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, some people are upset about it, I guess. Kind of got people all wound up, wrapped around the axle, use whatever colloquial term you'd like
Wow,
to there.
Ubuntu's never done that before.
Yeah, I know. But I feel like there's kind of this almost inordinate amount of scrutiny that Canonical gets over every other distribution. I don't understand why. Does anybody?
I mean, considering that they're the base of pretty much the most popular distributions out there, so things must be doing right. They love the base, but they just don't love Canonical,
But the other thing is, from what I'm seeing, it just said try Ubuntu Pro Beta, right? It's not like they're selling advertising to a third party,
Right.
to another company. And actually it's not, if you go through the Ubuntu installer, as the installer's running, it's kind of talking about features and talking them up. I'm not sure that do you consider that advertising or feature information?
I mean, I like the propaganda reel. I think that's great. I like,
Yeah.
tell
you're
me
constantly-
all your good new wares and everything you're excited about. I think that's a wonderful thing, because how else am I supposed to find out about it unless you talk about these things? And to me, I just feel like Ubuntu is just talking about their pro offering, and that's it.
I think people in marketing call this a house ad. You know how like if you're watching like TV, it sometimes have ads for the same show for the same network or something like that.
Yeah. How else are you supposed to inform people of something else that may be of interest? I'm going to go ahead and be a little controversial here, but I actually like advertising. As weird as that might sound, I like to know about the new wares that are out there, like new exciting, bits of something, because, I don't know, just it's a way to get, as long as it's not egregious advertising or, irritating advertising, but just informing me in a clever or humorous way about something new. And I think that's kind of fun. If I'm not interested, I'm not interested. But I might want to try this Dr. Squatch's soap someday. I don't know. Anyway, so
You left everybody speechless, Nate.
yeah, I guess so. It's like when you what does it happen when the show comes crashing, when you crashing the show?
Well,
like that? Yeah.
Nobody really cares what the ad's about if you've just interrupted the most important part of what you're watching.
Right.
Let's just put it that way.
Your updates, you mean?
Like your updates. I can't imagine they're too intrusive.
Nate, were you trying to see if you can get a sponsorship from a company with the subtle hint there? I'm kidding.
Actually, I mean, I wouldn't say no. Gotta pay the bills. This does take up quite a bit of my week. Not just today, but all the other stuff too. Yeah, I just thought this was an interesting conversation. I don't know if anybody had anything else that they would like to say on this, but
I was going to mention what Wrong with the Dolphin said. He said apt hook, separate utility the app calls when it runs. Remove the hook, job done.
I think they're just doing it for their internal stuff. It's not like they
No,
pushed into all of that.
he was asking how it was working. So
Oh, okay.
That's how the ad works.
Yeah.
It's just a hook that's called by the apt, and you can just remove the hook and then it's over.
So Ron says, "Bite your tongue, Nate." I think referring to my like for advertisement. I said not as long as it's not egregious. Clever advertising, I think is fine.
Is this ad only in the terminal or is it in the app store too?
It was in the terminal that I think it upset people.
Like most people
terminal.
don't update using the terminal. Like why do people care about this so much? It's a non-topic for me.
Because it wasn't there before, now it is.
Right.
and it
no
was
one
always
cares
free.
about the terminal. Like they go to the software center, click update. Like who updates using the terminal? Except
People-
Arch users.
People who SSH into their server, they don't want to see ads.
And it doesn't matter what Canonical does. They're going to burn Canonical at the stake every time. They could give everybody a briefcase with $1 million in it, and then someone would still punch them in the mouth. It just doesn't matter what they do. People are just always upset with Canonical.
But why is it caching it? Why not a check? So much more convenient.
They're advertising a free product. It's a free product.
I know.
Yeah,
You can call it a service, not even a product. It's a service.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Some of this extremism in Linux is so ridiculous. It's like you're not even in the real world.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. I really think it's just more a reaction to Canonical as it is opposed to anything else. Because to me, I just saw a lot of people overreacting.
And is that what everybody does?
does?
They just overreact.
I think
it's ridiculous.
I think you have to get mad at somebody, and I think Canonical just seems like it's like the whipping boy every time.
To be fair, they haven't helped themselves that much in general lately.
Well, nobody's perfect.
One question I have is how does OpenSUSE escape all this? I mean, they're a company as well. Why can't we throw some hate their way?
Well,
Just
because
joking.
it's such a cute lizard. Why would you throw hate at a cute lizard?
I mean, they
doesn't-
make money off the Linux as well, and they're a company that's run a bit like Canonical. Let's throw some hate their way.
I think Vince is because Ubuntu is used by like the number of people who use Ubuntu is like orders of magnitude higher than people who use SUSE. And also it's more designed for sysadmins and enterprise. But Ubuntu is like where everyone gets in, like beginner, entry-level Linux users, more advanced Linux users, extremist Linux users. Like every single one it's like a melting pot, and the size of the pool is so high. And always we listen to the loudest voices. So it's the most popular. It's the one used by most people. So
I'm not necessarily sure about that. Like, because I have a feeling that SUSE is just as, if not bigger than, Canonical as a company. I don't know how you can extrapolate that with. Yeah,
I've heard that it's much bigger than
It is. I was looking up NestWorth for a video, and yeah, it's a lot bigger from what I recall.
But I'm saying the number of desktop Linux users, like not workstation, not enterprise, like normal desktop, like most of us here are like normal desktop users. Most people use Ubuntu, and it's not even close. So that's why like people talk about it. People have opinions about it. Like anyone can have an opinion, but not many people use SUSE. Like, so people who really know this stuff has opinion about it, and most of them know the real world. I think I might be wrong.
I don't know.
What sort of advertising would OpenSUSE be doing? It'd be like Nathan Wolf has an unhealthy obsession with this OS.
Almost unhealthy. Almost.
So if again, I have been researching this actually for a video, and do we want to briefly talk about why Red Hat and SUSE are where they are?
Sure. Open mic night. You got the floor.
Yeah. So
here's the mic.
Red Hat. What some people probably don't realize is a lot of times when you buy a software, like what you're ultimately buying is that support, right? With a lot of things, Oracle, you have to be running Red Hat Linux for their support. Red Hat Enterprise Linux. There is such a thing as Red Hat Linux back in the day, but anyway, you have to be running RHEL to get actual support from Oracle. And I would venture to guess that is the same for many companies, is you have to be running something specific. With SUSE, they run, it is a system called SAP, is what is designed to run on their version of Linux. And that is what you have to have. You have to be using SUSE to be able to get support for that. And so that is how a lot of that revenue ends up coming in, is because people need those servers for SAP or Oracle products or whatever they happen to be. But that is what I tend to see in the those two companies from what I've been researching so far.
Yeah, SAP is used in manufacturing pretty heavily. So anywhere you have large-scale manufacturing, you usually have SAP, and if you have SAP, you typically have SUSE underneath it. But it's not always SUSE. It tends to be the company that runs or that builds SAP. I think they're also in Germany. Like, I think even in Nuremberg too, or something like that. I could be wrong. I don't know for sure. But they work very closely together on features and everything else, because it's one of their businesses, one of the main sources of revenue.
Yeah, and if you look at the SUSE website, like that is one of the big talking points they have when you're looking at the actual like SUSE licenses and stuff like that, is SAP.
Right. So yeah, I don't know how. I guess anywhere there's manufacturing, so I guess that's a lot. Do you think though that Linux has kind of hit its saturation point at this time? Like, how do you grow when everyone's already 90% of the internet and or whatever else is running Linux? I just wonder where's the growth, or is it just holding position at this point? I wonder.
I think the growth comes in desktop and gaming. Gaming, again, if you consider SteamOS as Linux, it is Linux. So that is significantly increasing the device itself is increasing the share of Linux in gaming. I don't know how many more units. Some people said they have already sold 1 million units. I'm not sure about the number, but I think they'll sell a lot of units in the next few years, and that will increase the share. It's just more people using it in a normal, like, we know how the role it plays in enterprise and web and servers and stuff, but it's regular people using it. That's where the growth is.
That's interesting.
There definitely used to be a lot more, what can you say, ideas for videos or problems for videos with Linux. but now I can see that sort of gone down a bit. If you have a look at the videos on YouTube these days for Linux, it's not so much problem solving anymore because I think Linux has become boring and just works on most occasions. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe when there's new things to talk about, new features, new hardware. I think when we have the next bits of new hardware, then we might have new problems to solve. So speaking of new hardware, new question. Is there any hardware you won't buy because it isn't open source?
Can you repeat? I don't get the question.
Is there any hardware you won't buy because it isn't open source or it doesn't work well with open source software? Has ever been?
Is there any hardware that is open source? Like for the most part, nothing is open source, right?
Well, okay. So when I say
System 76.
When I say open source, I mean like, so lots of hardware is fully open source, but they might have some blobs on it that are not. That have some, but for the most part, it's open source. For instance, I was looking at, they got an advertisement, I think on, hopefully don't ban me out of the saloon here, but I was using Instagram, and I got this advertisement for something called Remarkable, and I looked at it, and there's like,
I know.
it's like a tablet that you can write. It's an e-ink display that you can write on and do all these fun little things with. And I'm hesitant to, although I have a specific use for it. Like I already know how to use it because I've wanted something like this for a long time. But I'm hesitant to buy it because I don't know if it's open enough that I can use it the way I want. Can I add software to it? Can I do things with it? You know, I'm sure the hardware's locked down, the software's locked down, and I don't have a good feeling about buying it because I don't want to get locked into a piece of hardware that maybe doesn't work well with my system and so forth. I can use Google on the back end, but you know, what if I want to use something like Nextcloud? Can I use Nextcloud? I mean, it'll let me use the Microsoft Drive and Dropbox, but I don't really want to use those either. So maybe I don't buy it because I'm concerned about its closed nature and that eventually they're just going to brick it and then I can't use it at all and then, you know, game over.
Yeah,
So
that's the issue with most of the e-ink stuff because the major player is obviously Amazon in e-ink, and there are other players who mostly use Android as a backend and then have their own proprietary stuff to get touchscreen working and the pen stuff working. But some companies just stop existing, and then you don't have support for those devices, and it's really tricky buying e-ink devices where there's all these are like smaller companies creating devices, and most of it's like, forget about open source. The software itself is suspicious. Like it doesn't work well most of the time. Like you have to think about that.
So there's a similar device that's being developed by Pine64 called Pine Note. It's not available yet. I think maybe like developers can get it if they I don't know, sign something. But that interests me because it is open source and they are going to allow for anybody to do anything with it. But it may not have all the neat little whiz-bang features that the Remarkable does have. So I don't know. Does anybody? Is it just me that has this dilemma, or am I the cheese that stands alone, or does anybody else kind of go through this as well, like with things like the Stream Deck, not the Steam Deck, but the Stream Deck? I'm hesitant to even like consider one of those, like, because I don't know if it's going to work well with Linux. So I find I'm very picky and choosy in this.
It does not.
Does not work in Linux?
Not. I mean, you can kind of get it working with some third-party apps, but not with the official stuff.
I mean, I'm okay with third-party apps.
You have to see if it's worth it then. But yeah, it is something where I do tend to consider that. It's something where I, have to really think about that. Is it something that's going to work with Linux? If it's something that I'm going to use on the Mac, then I mean, obviously, then that's okay. But it is something where I really do have to look at hardware and be like, okay, is this something I can actually get to work on Linux? Do I really want it to try to fight it on Linux sometimes? But it just depends. I found something the other day, a macro keypad that actually had Linux drivers for it. Oh,
what is this macro keypad that you speak of?
Maybe you'll see a video about it in the not too distant future.
Is that an advertisement, Bash?
No, because you may not.
Oh, so it's a tease. Yeah, so I just thought.
I think for me, it really sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Nate.
Go ahead.
I think for me, it really depends if there is a good alternative that is open source. If there isn't, and it's something that you want and you need and you want to use, I would say just go for it. I mean, it's all about more at the end of the day for myself, making life easier and getting stuff done. All right.
Mhm.
I'll give you the example of when I did consider an open source alternative. And that's when I was buying a new keyboard for myself. And I'm just a little bit into mechanical keyboards. And for some of these keyboards, there is open source firmware for it called QMK. And some keyboards use it. A lot of the more premium keyboards use it. And whilst a lot of other keyboards have their own proprietary ways of configuring things like key mappings and RGB lighting. And when I found out that there was this open source firmware for it for some keyboards, I went specifically looking for some of them. And one of the keyboards that does use it is the System 76 launch one. I think they use QMK, but there are others as well. And that's kind of one example that I have. But I also have a lot of other examples where I've got just devices that I knew didn't have specific Linux drivers for. That I just have to get around somehow the way of using it.
Yeah, I have a few things that I've had to struggle with because they're not real Linux friendly, and I'm kind of I don't know, like tired of even going through that exercise at this point. Like I have to really want it, I guess. Adam, what snarky thing are you going to say about this conversation? Because that's kind of what Adam does.
Well, now that I can see Steve, all is well. Nah, I just kind of hopped in. I couldn't really hear because I was doing other things. But
Okay.
I imagine whatever Vince had to say was not worth listening to.
Right to the midsection.
Now, Vince said some pretty awesome stuff. Words, letters, those kind of things.
As
like
long
that
as you can understand them.
I like
What?
that
I couldn't hear you. What'd you say? Sorry.
I like that Vince uses the word whilst. Whilst? It's British English that is not common parlance in the US. But I like it. I think it sounds smart. Maybe I should try and incorporate
Really?
it. Yeah.
Because I'm anything but smart.
He is butt smart.
Well, there we go.
This distro is sponsored by OnlyFans.
Whoa.
All right. There's
Left Nate speechless.
yeah, I didn't know where to go with that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Everything comes to show. Anyone that's like train crash buttons. What just
I think
happened?
he's marking which bits to cut out when he's doing the editing. That's
Yeah,
what he's doing.
Nate's like, I'll just
This
stand
is
still for
where
a little
he
bit.
needs the Steam Deck though for these sound effects.
Yeah.
Just get an AI program to recognize my voice, and they'll do the editing for you.
There's that Rodecaster Pro. That one looks really interesting to me.
I don't think that one works with the Linux at all.
I don't know either. I said it looks interesting to me. And I didn't say I was going to commit any dollars to it. Too cheap.
Use someone else's dollars.
It's a good idea. So there's been a change into the GNOME project. They're closing their mailing list. And if anybody has read that, it was a thread on the Reddit. Oh, actually it's from Register, but I saw it on Reddit. It was I think I want to say Prophetic put it in the Telegram chat as well. So in a nutshell, what they were using was based in Python 2. It hadn't had any updates, and so they don't want to rely on Python 2 anymore. The program is not sustainable, so they're choosing to close their mailing list entirely. They're giving a fair bit of warning. It was first mentioned June 2020. The Mozilla Foundation did the same thing. So mailing lists seem like they're slowly dwindling away. Does anybody still use mailing lists for communicating or getting updates on projects?
Yeah, I do. I subscribe to several of Arch's mailing lists. I just read them. I don't reply.
Yeah, most of I just read them. I subscribe to quite a few. So do you think that mailing lists are just going to be on their way out, or do you think it's just another way people do communication?
I have no idea. I'm pretty new to mailing lists,
Okay.
but I think it's hard to communicate it that way because if there are very few people replying, if there's less activity, then it makes sense. But if there are a lot of people who want to get their ideas in, maybe it's not a good idea.
It
So-
seems to be a way that many developers communicate, and that's how you can get many updates on different open source projects. Whether that is an actual good thing for like a user, because maybe you don't want to know all these details, technical details. That probably isn't. But unfortunately, I think in some ways you do have to dig down to the mailing list sometimes if you want to find out some things.
So I want to bring up a positive to mailing lists.
Okay.
Mailing lists are through email, which
Right.
is a very standardized, democratized thing. And the danger could be that if you were to move discussion in many projects to Telegram, Discord, whatever, right, then you risk the issue of certain countries having those services blocked, or you have this idea that like if this company doesn't succeed, then all of our stuff is in their thing and like we can't go back. Mailing lists are also indexed often by search engines, whereas
Mhm.
something like a Discord or a Slack channel or something would not be. And so it's a lot easier to find the information through mailing lists than it could be trolling through a Discord or Slack, even especially if you live in a country that doesn't have access to those services, or you don't really want to put yourself on those services. You know, the idea of a mailing list through email allows a certain amount of anonymity that a lot of people might like, even if it's not oh, well, you got nothing to hide, but just, not having to put them to be a screen name, to be a whatever, like that's advantageous to people. So it's kind of a lowest common denominator of sorts, doing a mailing list versus a messaging service. Because I mean, anyone here who's run Discord, you got to have like 16 core processor and 64 gig of RAM to run Discord. It feels like. So being able to just do email is a lot simpler.
I do like the fact that it is, like you said, democratized, and it's easy to store the information locally as well. I mean, I can very easily create a local folder that I dump certain subjects into, and so to me, it's very handy.
Correct. Yeah, you can archive the mailing list easily in your own email program, right? You don't
Right.
have to necessarily rely on the third party to store the things, or even if the project controls the third party, something like a GitLab issue tracker or something like that. If that software goes EOL and there's like no way to get that information out, then it just it just dies in the ether, and that could be problematic, right?
For sure. And then the nice thing too is, well, I guess archive.org would have some of that too, but if the mailing lists are published someplace. But yeah, like a Discord or Slack or something like that, that can just disappear and never be, that history can all be lost. So yeah, I kind of see, I know a lot of people don't like mailing lists, but I kind of see the death of the mailing list as kind of a bad thing.
Yeah, I definitely see it as a bad thing. I understand that like a lot of people think they're clunky, they're hard to follow. Like I totally get that, right? Like following a discussion in a Slack channel or Discord or something like that's way easier. But like there's so much. The biggest thing for me is I've found solutions to problems through mailing lists, through search engines, like a ton of times, right? Like I'll be searching for an issue and it'll have brought up in a mailing list and someone will have a solution and like information. And like if that was hid away in some Discord or Slack, like that'd be kind of difficult to find.
Right.
Well,
Now they do have their own search utility, search functions, but they're not the same in any way. If half the time they don't even work properly.
how does a search engine index a mailing list? Does it have to do with where like the mailing list is posted in a public way?
Correct. Yeah, the most open source mailing lists are posted in like a mailing list archive on various web pages.
Right on. So then we're leaning on wherever that is to get it through the search engine.
Correct, but you can also archive that yourself through if you subscribe to the mailing list, you could have your own local archive of that to search through. It's just like there's so many more options through a mailing list than through a specific third-party service.
It's giving up a lot of control, and like Adam said, it's not easily to find because you would have to know where is the main discussion. Is it on Discord? Is it on some other proprietary format? And then you would have to get to that place and then search from there. So
Right. I think that's part of the problem, though, that GNOME is facing is the conversation had become very fragmented because of all these different services and whatnot. Some people using Matrix for live chat or IRC and so forth. But then you have GitLab, the conversation that happens there as well, which to me, the commits and everything else in GitHub or GitLab, whatever, that seems like a good alternative because those things are committed like a mailing list, and you can get messages like a mailing list as well. So to me, I do appreciate that form of communication when it comes to project information.
So the issue then becomes a matter of what happens when GitLab goes away, right? Is there an easy way to take those discussions out of issues and other tracking in there and export them to something more useful, like something or whatever the next big thing is? And, it's silly to think that any one of these services won't disappear, right? We've seen it plenty of times in all of our lifetimes. Like, oh no, AOL's gone? How can that be, right?
Right.
And the same idea, right? So if we look at something like, let's say they have a Slack channel, like a whole like Slack server for GNOME stuff. How easily can they get their conversations out of there into the next service? Or how can they get their stuff out of there to post on the web easily indexed and searchable and organized? Like it becomes that you become very siloed into those. And I know probably plenty of us have experienced that in various workplaces and other things where it's like, we've been using this tool for so long that we can't move to something else because nothing else, our stuff doesn't go to the other thing, right?
Right.
And that's the danger in doing that. But something like a mailing list, like IRC, despite I do not like IRC, but something like IRC, these other things are very like standardized, and like I'm pretty sure they, IRC has an RFC out there, but like these things are standardized and they're easily you can transport them to various places. Even something like Matrix and all that, it's open source, but at the time, when Matrix goes the way of the dodo and something new comes along, will somebody bother to build a way to get their stuff out? And that's always the issue, because you don't want it to just go away. Because like if you have it in Discord and Discord fails as a company, well, do you get to keep your stuff? Can you pull your stuff out of Discord? Like that kind of problem, right? Or is it like the years of discussion just gone? The years of solutions just gone, So those kind of issues.
Not to be a contrarian, but for the sake of discussion, do you see a point when email goes away?
I see a point where, so email being like an RFC standard, like an actual like internet standard, it could be less used, certainly, but as a standard part of the web, of the internet, I don't think so. It's like, it's the same idea. Like people were like, oh, well, email is going to replace, no one's going to send letters. No one's going to get anything in the actual mail, right? And yeah, we've lessened the amount of stuff we send in the mail, except for packages, I guess. But it's still there, right? We still have a postal service, and we still have, various ways to send physical mail. It's lessened. And just the same way, like most people, their email box is not for discussion, not for conversation, but for like business correspondence and, two-factor codes or whatever, those kind of things. But
Right.
It's still a vital part. Like I can't see you getting by in the internet without an email address, right? Much in the same way you need a postal address. And so I think it's like such an integral part of using the internet that I don't see that going away, because and it's not controlled by a company. Right? If Google stops doing Gmail, well, if I manage to get my stuff out of Gmail, I guess I'm good, but email is email, right? IMAP is IMAP, POP3 is like it's all standardized. Whereas like Discord is not a standard. It is Discord. Slack is not a standard. It's Slack.
Right. The Matrix is the standard, but it's something else.
Do they have an RFC
it's a
for it?
protocol.
Protocol, yeah.
I think I'll go back to what Adam said, that actually the email predates the web. Email is older than the web. So it existed longer than the
Yeah,
web.
much older.
And I was going to post this link to the story about how if you have an Adobe products and you have Pantone colors, you will have to pay $15 a month now if you want to use the same colors that you had used on your previous projects. So you would have to download this other app, and because you're using an old project, you want to reuse the same colors, you would have to pay $15 a month. And then it's kind of like the same way you get locked into things. Just as an example.
Yeah, because you go years and years using those colors, and then suddenly, oh hey, we want $15. It's like, well, now I guess I just got to pay. And so the same thing could go, like theoretically, if GNOME goes with Slack, right, and they have their whole thing, and then Slack's like, oh, by the way, we need you to pay this, or by the way, we're changing our terms of service that you can't post these or this or that, and like, if that interferes with their day to day, that's problematic. But there isn't, people want to talk about free speech and stuff. Like, I can't think of a more free speech place than email.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it could be censored if somebody really tried, but I think it might be a little more effort.
It's really hard, but I think email has a lot of problems. I will say with all this conversation, but it's been here forever, and it doesn't seem like it's ever going to go away.
As long as there's retail, it's never going away, because that's what retail needs. I mean, everything that we do is get that email address, because you're not going to see retail companies use Telegram, Matrix, all that kind of stuff. It's just not going to happen. Maybe far in the future, but email, it's just an easy way to slam. I mean, just I was looking to have our tree cut down, and I called this one service for estimate. I'll put us on the mailing list. I didn't use them. I still keep getting emails, and I had to add it to spam because it just keeps coming, even though I selected not to get it. But many companies out there, especially in retail, still use it, and it's not. So in that aspect, it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, most companies also use internally with employees. Like I've had, in the last couple jobs I've had a different app each, where they have internal communications, they have payroll and request time off and all that. It's through like third party services that sell that software as a service to businesses. And so, as easy as it would be for a company, like for example, ABC Warehouse, they use Ubuntu on all of their machines. Last I knew, I only know that because a friend of mine worked there, and I walked in, and well, she still does. Okay, I was corrected in real time. She still does, and I saw Ubuntu. It was Unity desktop behind the counter. I was like, hey, that's cool. And she's like, oh yeah, there's something about the son that the guy that owns the place. He's big into tech and stuff, and he did all that. It's like that's a rare thing to see, and they could do a lot of those things with stuff with probably Matrix or whatever, because they could self-host. But it's so much easier for companies a lot of times just to pay somebody that's out there doing it. So you have that competition with, there's that money issue comes up again there, Nate, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
Well, gotta grease the wheels. People gotta eat.
A little bit. I know Sony does a good job of using BSD to get away with making their consoles, though. I'll tell you what.
Is that Sony that does that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember that's how they originally hacked the PS3s. Was because BSD had a CVE that was unfixed in the browser, and I forget, it was like a Python thing or something like that. And so you could point the web browser of the PS3 to a website, and they did some trick with the memory, like a buffer overflow or something, and you could execute. They had remote code execution from a remote web page through the browser. So
that's wild.
It's the only reason I know it was BSD. It's because that was the exploit that GeoHot used.
Special bit of information. They're still using BSD.
Oh yeah, they are.
PS4 and PS5 are still both based on BSD.
Well,
hope their web browser better.
Actually, aside from a few instances in the PS5, they've pretty much removed the browser.
Good. They should. They should have never put a web browser on that thing ever.
I mean, but there's a couple ways you can get into it. Like if you try to link it to a service, like something like Twitter or something that like opens a browser in. There's still a browser. It's just not like
Oh.
openly accessible. So
Like
you just have to kind of trick it into opening the browser and then do things. But yeah, it's still there, but it's not really. It's not as easy as like, oh, open the browser, go to this URL, do your thing. Like,
because web apps. So you got to have a browser somewhere.
yeah,
Let's offload this to a different server. Let's not run a Twitter app on the PlayStation.
oh, the Twitter app is there. You just have to authenticate, and it opens up their web page to authenticate.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So it's still there. Just a little
Maybe
bit harder to
Elon
get
can
to.
fix that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think he can fix. He can't fix Sony. I don't think he can buy another corporation.
One at a time. We'll take
Yeah.
our wins where we can get them.
Yeah, right.
He'll buy it and fire all the Walkmans.
Maybe they'll stage a walkout. You won't have to.
Do they have Walkman anymore? Is that even a thing?
I don't know.
I don't think so. No.
I found a Zune sitting here. It still works. The thing's old as crap. Oh, tangents that persist. But yeah, services and standards and things. That's like if you want to talk about how archaic to some degree the email standards are, people are still making the mistake of CCing everybody and exposing massive email lists like Parler did not that long ago. That was kind of funny. Like all their VIPs now know who all the other VIPs are. Because I didn't get one. I had a Parler account just because let's go find out what this is all about. And I didn't get an email, but people I follow that are like journalists and whatnot were like, hey, learn how to use email. It's so old, people don't even know how to use it still.
It's hard.
Admittedly, most email clients, web or otherwise, could really do with two very distinctly different icons for reply and reply all, because they often look way too similar to one another.
Or just hide the reply all so you have to go find it when you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, make
Or
the
just-
reply all a drop down menu. You have to click on the separate.
Yeah, you got to be very deliberate about it. Yeah, that would really help.
Or they could just gnome it out of existence. It's like, no,
No,
Put it in the settings panel.
yeah, remove it.
You have to install email tweaks to be able to
Email
access
tweak.
it. Yeah.
Right. Pro move.
You have to pay for that feature. It's
Yeah,
Put it behind
Ubuntu.
sudo.
Ubuntu GNOME's new pro feature is reply all.
That would be very funny, and I kind of want that to happen now, just so we
Just
can
a
talk about it. So
We need a good satire site in the Linux community. We really do.
There've been a few. They don't stick around very long because not a lot of clicks.
can't do it for the clicks. So Jonas says, "Whoa, there is still a Walkman." So I don't know if he's got some evidence to back it up, but
I
apparently
posted the link.
Oh, you
above
post
it.
the link?
Yeah, they're still selling in the Walkman, Sony. It says in stock.
MP3. No way. And it's got a physical headphone jack. Look at that.
It says I can buy it between November 1st, November 2nd. I can get it delivered.
That's
They come in
excellent.
black and red. That's cool.
I still have my Walkman from. I said I don't know if it's a Walkman. It's from the '80s. It's a Sony.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I don't know
I've got my CD player from late 90s. That's a Walkman too. It's cool.
I always had like knockoff stuff like Strut Dude and stuff like that.
Strut dude.
It's like Walkman, except not. Probably with a much worse mechanism. Sony did make good cassette mechanisms back in the day.
Sony made a lot of good hardware. They still do. Like, I mean, just gaming wise, right? Like the PlayStation hardware is really solid, and Microsoft could, they're a software company. I get it, and like Sony is traditionally a hardware company, but they really do make some solid stuff.
Well, Microsoft, who is a software company, probably makes the best tablet out there. Arguably.
But is it a
Heavy
tablet?
implications there.
But is it a tablet or is it a computer?
Sure.
What's
I
a
don't know.
computer?
It's a good question.
Something you can change the operating system in. That's a computer.
Then yes, it's a computer.
Now, why would you want to go do that?
Yeah, for funsies.
For people who want to mess with computers.
Yeah, there was an interesting debate with Nate and Matt on Nate's podcast about what's a computer. We don't want that again.
This is who is it?
I was referring to a silly Apple commercial, but yeah.
Yeah. So apparently my Steam Deck is not a computer. Or it is a computer. I don't know. I don't even know anymore.
It's a cyber deck.
Ooh.
That's a
So
fun word.
I actually got to interact with a Steam Deck.
And
it was lighter than I thought it would be. I thought it would be heavier. And B, pretty impressive. Like the one had the etched glass, the anti-glare one.
Yep.
I was like, that's a nice looking screen.
It is.
Like it's only slightly higher resolution than the Switch screen. Now I don't have an OLED Switch, so that probably looks infinitely better. But the colors looked better reproduced on the Steam Deck than my Switch. And I liked the controls better than the Switch, but I understand why the Switch Joy-Cons are the way they are. But yeah, from what I gather, the battery life is complete butt. So
well, for the way I use the Steam Deck, the battery lasts all day.
it looks like a really good like either emulation device or indie game device, and it can run AAA stuff, and that's really awesome. But I think it really shines with indie and emulation stuff.
Yeah, probably. It's a lot of fun just to tinker with also.
Yeah, I probably won't get one, but I don't really have much of a use for one. But they are pretty
great
neat.
Arch platform.
Yeah, I did get to see the update process. That was really, really nice. I was like, wow, like the update was pretty quick.
Yeah, it doesn't update like Arch. It updates like SteamOS.
It was nice.
So I heard that before people like in small towns had electricity, maybe one person had a radio and they would hook it up to like a car battery, and then that way they could play for a long time. Could you do the same thing to a Steam Deck?
Sure, it's just a USB-C plug on it. You can plug it into whatever. A lot of cars, a lot of modern vehicles have USB-Cs. You can plug right into it, and it can draw enough power to keep it going.
I'd like to get a hold of the, the thing I really like. It's getting me this much closer to buying one of these. Is the way they have the advertising set up for the dock, because it had the Steam Deck there, all nice and neat, next to an ultra wide monitor and audio interface and guitar stuff and all this other things going on. And I was just thinking about how difficult it had been to try to get audio to run really, really well on the Raspberry Pi in order to do a live synth bass rig, because the software I use isn't terribly taxing at all for it. It's called Sunvox, a Russian developer does it, and it's really good. It's like retro, looks like something on a panel out of a 70s or 80s sci-fi movie or something. It's really cool. It's got, it's really good for like making Vangelis synth stuff. But just to try to run a Raspberry Pi or something like that with that and an interface was like, But if I had a Steam Deck next to just a small keyboard, with like octave or two of keys and a USB thing, that would be great. It's like the perfect size to just 3D print a little thing for it and just there and have it, and then bring it home and set it right there. And then it could be your studio too, if you really wanted it to, if it's powerful enough. And if you can get those drivers right, the audio works quick enough with the USB on it for that C port. Because that's my only thing, is I haven't messed a whole lot with USB-C and interfaces yet. I'm curious to see what the bottlenecking issue might be there.
Well, I will say that, USB-C can handle, a lot of data throughput. I use the USB-C dock with it, and it works great. So I don't see it as not being able to handle that. It's currently my most powerful computer I own as far as raw horsepower. I'm not sure, like after thermal saturation, if that would be the case, but at least in raw power, it's the most powerful thing I have.
That's crazy. In that small little package.
Yep.
I'm probably going to be the next one I go with then.
I do have to install this on my
the
64
R7
Imposter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about USB-C, it's not really like a standard like USB 3 in terms of speed. So it really depends on what kind of USB-C you have.
Yeah, because there's lots of different like data rates depending on the device, and I don't know what the standard, like, I don't know what the Steam Deck can actually handle well, but
Does it have a physical audio jack on it? Like headphone, microphone combo port?
yeah, it does.
Does it have Bluetooth?
Mhm.
Oh, wow. That's fun.
Yep. I sometimes when we do like gaming night, we'll hook it up to the the big screen, and I have a bunch of like Wii U Pro controllers that I'll pair with it, and then we'll play something together.
Perfect segue to the next question is, have you tried Steam's new beta update with this updated big screen or big picture mode? Because I updated it, and then mine looks the same. I even went in for the beta and everything through Steam, but my big picture mode looks the same.
I have not tried it on a regular computer, but that's the new interface. That interface is what they use on SteamOS. So I don't know when it's coming down to the regular Steam clients. I don't know when that's happening, but it is a much nicer big picture mode. So
it says it's now available for testing in the latest Steam beta for desktops.
Yeah, I couldn't say. But that is a good segue for what we're doing next week, which is an application appetizer. So I think the last time I said we did a desktop environment, which I guess went over only kind of okay. Like me and Colin, and I think Jinda got to crash it. Oopsie.
Very accurate.
So there wasn't a whole lot there as far as as it didn't work all that well. But I would like to see about maybe trying out another application. Have there been any applications that anyone here has tried out? They really want to share it with somebody to, like, you really need to try this out. It's very cool. Not OBS, Steve.
How about RetroArch?
How about what?
RetroArch?
RetroArch?
Yeah.
RetroArch? I use that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that people... Has everyone here used RetroArch before? I imagine it's kind of been around. No? Vince, you haven't used RetroArch before? Steve, have you used
pretty cool. It's fun.
RetroArch? No?
Nope.
Nope. I imagine Mark probably has used RetroArch.
I did once on my Raspberry Pi 3. I had a B+. This is the 4 now. I haven't installed it on here yet. That would be kind of a neat thing. I got this free laying around.
So the cool thing about RetroArch, if anyone has not tried RetroArch, if you like older games, so it's too bad Zeb isn't here still, because he loved old pixely games, if anybody remembers that. And by he loved old pixely games, he absolutely despised them. So RetroArch is it's a front end for various emulators, game engines, and media players. So you can run those wonderful old retro classic games from a wide range of different consoles and platforms and whatnot in a unified configuration. I primarily use it for like stuff from the 90s and early 2000s, like handhelds and whatnot. I never had a Game Boy growing up, so my Steam Deck is my Game Boy.
How would you compare RetroArch to like a RetroPie?
I think RetroPie is based on RetroArch.
It is. That's why I brought it up.
Would there be like
Used
a lot
it.
of setup to get it to be like RetroPie?
I'm not sure. I haven't gone down that road.
Pokemon Platinum and RetroArch, it's pretty easy, at least on Arch. All the required packages are in the repos. You just need to download the main RetroArch and 2-3 additional packages for all the GUI stuff, and whatever device you want, there's a core for that. It's called cores. So all the emulators are cores. For me, I'm playing Nintendo DS, so I need a Melon DS core. And the configuration part was sort of easy. I got it set up in like maybe under an hour, and I can probably play any Nintendo DS game right now.
You can also get RetroArch through Steam.
Yep, that's how I've been using it.
That too. You can get it to Steam too. Yeah, or I don't know. I think there's a flat pack. I'm not sure.
There's a flat pack also.
There's a flat. Okay.
Yep.
So there's a flat.
You can do flat pack. You can do in Steam. You can I shouldn't even say most because I don't actually know. Many distributions have it in their repositories as well.
I'm pretty sure Ubuntu has it. It's there in Arch for sure. I'm not sure about Fedora, but it should have it.
And there's plenty of different front ends for RetroArch, and it's one of those things that's super well layered and done. That if you want to trick out everything, you could trick out anything from going through Steam as your easiest if you have Steam, to doing like a Raspberry Pi thing and putting your own interface on it, to building a full arcade cabinet and building your own graphical, assets for it. Like, it is super cool. However far you want to go with it.
I didn't know about
It has
that.
a lot of really neat sorting features too. One time I wanted to see how well it worked because I had quite the collection of ROMs or backups, depending on what your jargon preferred is in that realm. And I was like, I had a bunch of duplicates with things from, downloading here and there and everywhere. And what it does is, instead of just reading the file names, it will read the metadata off of the header in the ROM files, and it will kick out all of the ones that are different or that are duplicates. It'll show if you have differences. Funny enough, that's how we found out that Nintendo was selling us back the originally ripped ROM of Mario Brothers when they put out the their little retro system.
They probably download it from a ROM place too to make it easy for them.
Oh yeah, because in the header file it had the guy's original handle that ripped it.
That's
ripped
hilarious.
the cart. We'll never live it down.
Well, I'm for testing that, but I feel like it's very self-serving because it's something I really enjoy already. So I guess if we do RetroArch, how do you think we should evaluate it? Just so it's not so nebulous. I think we're all pretty old here, except for maybe Servan.
I think a simple way is to find. You might have played games when you were younger, or in 90s or whatever. Like, find a game you want to really play again, and get it working, and see how your experience of that game is on a computer.
If you need recommendations, I got you.
Okay, Adam, fire away your
Adam,
recommendations.
yeah, Nate, all these people who are excited about retro games. So yeah, I think that's a good goal, just to find a game you really want to play again, like nostalgic game, and then try to play it.
Okay, and see how well it works. Maybe find something that maybe doesn't work as well, too. Or if you want, we could talk about something like some games work great in emulation, some games do not. So it'd be interesting to see maybe how that works out.
Yeah, recognize that some emulators are easy to get going, like an NES or SNES or something like that. Pretty straightforward. Getting something like a PlayStation or any kind of CD-based one, you're gonna have to either rip your own BIOS off of your own hardware or sail the high seas and find a BIOS elsewhere.
Sail the high seas.
You're gonna have to get around that for CD-based stuff. There's some that don't, like EPSXE has one of them that has its own soft BIOS that kind of works for the most part. But something like a PS2 emulator or Xbox emulator, I think Dolphin doesn't require one, but there's certain ones that do require BIOS files, and that can be an extra step. Getting ISOs in the right format can be, again, you can get all this stuff on the internet, but if just recognize that some emulators are just easier to get going and some others are not, and you will have to tweak stuff because depending on your hardware, especially when it comes to stuff like N64 emulation, that's such a pain because certain hardware works better in different HLE versions and all this other stuff, and because and even different games, right? You can load up a certain game I don't know, Majora's Mask or Banjo Tooie or something like that, and the emulator will probably complain a lot. But you can load up something simple like Mario 64, and the same emulator will be like, "Yeah, this is good."
Yeah,
So-
the reason for that is the N64 had an expansion, a memory expansion pack that there's a little door right in
It's not
front.
necessarily that. It's
Some of 'em.
the complexity of the actual games themselves and the feature sets that they use, the kind of tricks that the developer used in making the game work on the original hardware. It can become a little more. And the expansion pack is a known quantity. It's just extra RAM. That's not that complex. It's the tricks and such that each game implements to get things done.
The Nintendo 64 was actually a very complex hardware architecture to develop against too. So
Yeah,
I'm sure emulating it is equally as complex.
it's funny because you can run some pretty nice stuff on like a Raspberry Pi 4, but even N64 still struggles on that thing because of how complex that weird piece of hardware is.
So you can run a 64-bit machine inside of a 32-bit machine?
Well,
No,
The Pi 4 64.
yeah.
No, but not all the Pis were 64-bit.
Pi 3 and 4 I know are 64-bit, and that's what RetroArch or RetroPie requires.
I
They,
mean, also, it's address space regardless. It's very you're emulating the hardware regardless. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, N64 can be problematic. Saturn stuff can be a little wonky. I think it's due to a lot of the Saturn stuff not being super well developed, but it's been a while since I've looked into Saturn emulation. PS1, you're good. Dreamcast, you're good. PS2, GameCube, you're good.
PSP.
Wii, PSP, yeah, PPSSPP is a very good emulator. That runs incredibly well.
So
And of course, all like the older like 16-bit and stuff, those work fine.
MAME. The
installed-
MAME stuff is great for arcade.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
it.
I installed the PSP. I think it's the one that you said that has
Yeah,
multiple Ps.
PPSSPP. Yeah.
That one. Fun to say, right? To play the Petsky robots, my son has he likes. He's a little bit. He's an interesting young man. Well, he's only 11, but he has a thing for like old video game systems. I don't know where he gets this idea from. It's really weird, but he likes to
I
play.
want to look at his friends.
I know I should probably evaluate his. It could be his parentage too. I don't. He's got a
Yes.
questionable father. He likes to play the PS2 specifically, and he likes the PSP. He wanted like for Christmas one year he wanted a PSP. I'm like, you realize that you can't get one new in box, right? And he's like, yeah, I just want a PSP. And he likes the Nintendo DS and things like that. Anyway, so I got the from the 8-bit guy. There's a port of Petsky robots for the PSP, and it's actually a lot of fun to play on the PSP. And so actually I put that game on the Steam Deck.
Do you have a link to that?
I do. But I bet Eris or Jinda will beat me to it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Because I'll load that on my PSP. That'd be cool.
All right. It is in the chat. Aha. I beat you. It's like $10.
Oh, I just had it.
Yeah, if you get retro, if we do RetroArch,
I think it may as well.
Steam probably has the what looks like the quickest way to get in and just go. If you got a Steam running box, because then when it's free, and two, right under where all the DLC is listed, it has all the emulators. You have to manually check those and install them that way.
It's done within the client itself.
Yeah, you can. Do they have it in the client too?
Yeah, you can just go through and just load the cores that you want.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I remember before I'd had to go and download them and drop them on the thing, but I was messing with the Pi at the time, so neat.
Yeah, it is.
There's lots of cool tools on there for setting up your Bluetooth controllers and what player they are, and you can remap your buttons. So if you want to go classic and you have a classic controller, cool. But if you have way too many buttons to play Sonic the Hedgehog on, which is really the only way. I wouldn't recommend anyone buying any new Sonic the Hedgehog games unless Christian Whitehead made it. So, but all the old school ones, they run really well in emulators. Soundtracks.
You play the port of Sonic the Hedgehog from the Sega Master System, but one that's ported to the Commodore 64. That's how you do it right there. It's like many layers of conversion.
I've seen that port.
I need to play that.
I don't even. I had no words.
I was amazed. 'Cause I played it on actual hardware. I was amazed by how well that ran. Like it was astounding to me that they could get that much performance out of a 40-year-old computer. To me, that they could do that.
Some
So.
of those
Just don't play the Mega Man DOS games and you're good.
some of the new homebrew games that people make for like old systems is kind of amazing how much they can take out of the old systems. Now that like people have learn new tricks and everything, it really makes the old systems look way better than you think they were.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the modern ports take a lot of cues in terms of like technical tricks from the demo scenes back then.
Yep.
Because the demo scene back then, there were a lot of people pushing that hardware some serious ways, and I think a lot of those tricks are well known now, and actual game developers can take advantage of them. But yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, I'm amazed by, like, there's a lot of newer games. By newer, I mean like in the last few years, built for the Commodore 64 that have no business running on a 40-year-old computer. So, cool, I guess. All right, so RetroArch it is. The goal is going to be to play a game from your youth, from years ago. For Vince, he's still youth, so it doesn't matter. So anything you want to just play it on an old game on a modern Linux or Linuxy system, whatever, and see how the experience is. If it brings back that kind of nostalgia joy, or if there's something lacking in it or whatever. We'll just kind of talk about that, I guess.
Steve, do they have an emulated version of Hoop and Stick from your childhood, or
Who's in what?
Hoop and Stick.
Pong. He gets to play Pong.
Boop, beep. I should check out the
Okay.
Atari emulator. I bet it's still Stella, my favorite Atari emulator. Underlying.
Speaking of Atari and old systems, Nate, have you found any use for that piece of hardware I sent you?
Not yet. I don't have the thing to go with it yet, but I will. It's just a matter of
That thing
time.
is cool. It's
I'm-
kind of neat.
Behind me, it's next in line. It truly is. I already bought the lumber. Lumber was delivered today, but I'm going to be building a new retro table behind me, so that
Nice.
I can properly set everything up the way I would like. Because just right now it's just a mess behind me, and I want to make it a mess. So I want to commit a neatness and make it more usable. So
Nice.
then I can bring that out. Although I don't.
So you're gonna have that playing in the background while you do the streams.
I think what I'll do is I'll have all the different retro machines going, doing something. I have some old CRTs that can probably flicker and annoy people too. That'd be fun. All right,
I was
so
playing NBA Jam earlier. It was fun. You should have that running in the background.
like doing it's a
Baseball.
track
The attract mode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
But I should have a pinball machine on this side here as well in the next few weeks, hopefully. I'm excited about that. It's in the room over there, but I can't put it there until those things are moved into the basement. But I can't move the things into the basement until I paint. I'm resealing the floor and everything, so I can't build any of that stuff until the paint is dry. But I can't actually paint until the compound I use to seal the cracks is dry. So, just waiting.
You have the Back to the Future pinball machine.
I do. A lot of fun. I'm glad I bought it back in November of 1999. All right. So now it's that time of the night for last call. So Mark, tomorrow, the Atlanta Linux Enthusiast Group, you're meeting at 3 p.m. Eastern?
3 p.m. Eastern every Sunday.
I got
And,
it.
Yeah, that's right. So the Atlanta Linux Enthusiasts have an online meeting. There's no set agenda. You just bring your problem, and folks will try to help you out. Yeah, you can get more information at l.org.
Excellent. I've had fun every time I've joined, so I imagine everyone would have fun if they join. And you don't record it or stream it, so you can be a little bit more free in how you speak.
That's right. We can, people can share screen and show the problem, and then we can actually, tell them all the commands to run and get the problem solved. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, you got to kind of manage your own topic if you want to if you want to get that get that thing installed, then you need to probably keep people on the questions. So.
Well, like any good group of nerds, you can wander your topics very far from wherever it is you started. Steve, the least punchable face on all the internet. Are you doing a coffee clutch tomorrow?
I am planning on it.
What's that mean?
I don't know. I'm not feeling extremely great. Gonna be hitting sack early tonight, but yeah, no, I got it stream set up for tomorrow. We're gonna use the Restream chat relay to connect Discord and YouTube chat together.
I didn't know that was a thing.
With Restream IO, you can.
Very cool. That's good to know. I'll probably bother you on another Wednesday for helping me do something else with Linux Saloon, which I want to say thank you once again, because for anyone who doesn't know, this past Wednesday, I decided I'd make some modifications, some improvements that Steve kept nudging me to do, essentially, that I needed to kind of up my game a little bit, and so I have. And thanks to Steve, now things actually are better for OBS for how I handle these, like the chat, and then being able to pop up stuff, like Anna Rita, I can her she just said LOL, I can pop that up because Anna Rita likes to laugh out loud all the time. So little things like that I can do now because Steve showed me how to do it. So I much appreciate, Steve, you doing the things that you do to help out a guy like me who doesn't have the patience.
You're very welcome anytime.
Or the headspace. Well, excellent. So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 Central, and then whatever on the Pacific time. Too early on the Pacific.
Up to 11 or 10 o'clock at night for Vince.
Right. The next day or something like that. No, not the next day. I don't know. He's in the next day now. Time traveler. Destination Linux is streaming live tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m., so check that out. You can go to this very same channel on YouTube or on Twitch and check and watch some professionals. What kind of professionals, I guess? Linux User Space, they release an episode bi-weekly. The last one that they released this past Monday, Dan and Leo, they gave their thoughts on, oops, I had the wrong one. They talked about the history of Nano, and Leo got to read some Dutch, and I really enjoyed that. It made me laugh. So if you want to hear some funny Dutch reading, it's such a small part of the show, but they go into the history of Nano. It's actually very interesting. And also they're going to be doing Kali Linux as their next challenge. So that's probably going to be on the docket for us as well. So we can kind of, basically if I cheat off of their notes, then it makes it a little easier for me here. So there, that's the man behind the curtain. I am on a podcast called Linux Out Loud. Matt played hooky. He wasn't there. So Wendy and we had a discussion without Matt. So it was probably a lot nicer than what it normally is. But essentially we talked about variety being the spice of Linux. The good and the bad. There's good spices and bad spices. That was the general conversation we had. I have, if you want more stuff on me, I have a website. It's cubiclenate.com. Sometimes I do things. I want to thank you all for being a part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting and the YouTube stream, as well as everyone for watching the show after the fact. I want to thank everyone involved in making the Linux open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but for us to also enjoy our technology. Linux truly puts personal back into personal computers. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yas.
See ya.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, it's...
I would...
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
Once you... excuse me. Once you install a...
Cough button.
Anyway, the Then I was going to go with that.
One
Yep.
question I
To
have
be
is
fair, they
how
haven't
does
helped themselves.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that Vash? What you say, Vince?
There definitely used to be a.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
So
You know,
currently,
have to look. Oh,
Go ahead,
I'm
Sirlon.
playing.
All right. All set.
I already got some Pokemon Red happening over here. I'm ready.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna. It crashed once on me, but it's all right now. Got it going. I think I just hit the wrong button on my controller and it didn't know what to do with it.
I've been playing Pokemon Fire Red. That's been a lot of fun.
It's a GBA one, right?
Yeah, I like that. I got through Red. I beat Red, and I thought, well, I want to see how that compares with Fire Red.
I definitely prefer the GBA versions. Yeah, Fire Red and what was it, Leaf Green?
Yep.
I think. Yeah, those are
And-
definitely the better versions.
And I figured out how to do trades while on the Steam Deck between Leaf Green and Fire Red, so I wanted a Bulbasaur, so I traded myself a Bulbasaur, so I could have a Bulbasaur as well.
How did
See,
you
that
trade
would have
yourself?
been like a rich kid thing, right? If the kid who had 2 Game Boys.
Yeah.
And there was one kid on my block that had the cable. I had the big fat gray Game Boy.
DMG.
I had the OG one. My wife has the red case. It's the translucent red. Was that a
Mhm.
color version, Katie?
It's
Yeah.
probably a Game Boy Color. Yeah.
Sounds
But it was still the same format, like a big fat thick like brick with it like took 4 or 5 double A's. It should be in the drawer. So we can combine. I could take the experience of RetroArch. Oh yeah, she's even got the fancy case for it.
Wow. Nice.
Wow, look at that, hot dang.
Yeah, she got a bunch of games in there. Let's see what's in here.
So when I was growing up,